So Bimpe, thank you for joining me here today on Race and STEM. This is something which I know has been in the pipeline for a little while, I think
Mhm.
from 2023, but we finally made it, and I'm very, very happy to have you here on the Race and STEM network to discuss everything of what we're going to talk about over the next 45 or so minutes. So one thing in which I always like to start the interviews with is just a little bit of an overview or a spotlight into who you are,
Mm.
your professional
Mhm.
journey in all sorts. So the floor is yours.
Oh, okay. Well, thanks, Steve. I'm really happy to be here. I know it's taken us a little time, but now that we're here, I'm just kind of ready for this conversation.
Good.
So, a spotlight on me. I am somebody who I'm not a big planner. I'm always very open to just like what life has to offer and making the most of opportunities as they come along. So I'm a pharmacist by training. But I knew very early on that the life of a pharmacist in the kind of like pharmacy sense was not for me. And so I was kind of directed by a very kind university lecturer to go into pharma essentially. So I did my PhD with this lecturer, and then again, kind of was like at that crossroad of what do I do next? Am I going to stay in academia? And then just decided that yeah, let's try this pharma business, and I've just loved it ever since. And I've kind of gone from big pharma and ever decreasing sizes of pharma, and I think that the niche for me now has this like kind of smaller companies where you're kind of concentrating on one or two areas, and it's all kind of hands on deck, and you get to see essentially the sausage being made, which I really enjoy seeing everything, not just the part that relates to me.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I guess that's kind of me in a kind of short summary.
Let's go further back. Let's go to, your upbringing, the
Mhm.
family surroundings. Can you shed some light on that for me and what that journey was?
So I come from African heritage. So I'm Nigerian. I actually wasn't born in this country. I was born in Nigeria, but I moved here when I was around 4 years of age. So kind of spent, all my formative years here. And so I think most people who have African parents will understand the importance of education. So it's always been a given that I would go to university. But lucky
Uh,
for my parents, I actually really enjoyed the sciences, and that was something that's been with me since I was probably in secondary school. So I was always kind of focused on the STEM, and always, just that's where the interest was for me. So it was always like the biology, the chemistry, not the physics. That definitely was not the one for me. But so yeah, so it was a very normal thing for me to just kind of start with going to A levels and then going on to university, and kind of upwards and onwards. And I think I made my mother so happy when I actually did a PhD, because she really wanted me to be a doctor, but it was not for me. And so this was like the next best thing for her.
okay. That's interesting, isn't it?
Mm.
There's a couple of things to unravel here because you speak about African and Africans who obviously education is so important. We both laughed. Why are we both laughing?
Because we know.
But what do we know?
Well, we know that it's just like, I think it's a very important thing for Africans. This it's no coincidence that some of the kind of stereotypical characters. Do you remember the show Desmond, where there was
Popeye and Matthew.
exactly Matthew,
Matthew.
exactly.
Yes.
Matthew was on like his third like degree at that point, and he was a man in his probably 40s or 50s at that point. So
Yeah.
it's just a known thing that education is really important to Africans. And it can get comical because you can, find yourself being overeducated. So,
Yeah.
like Matthew.
With that's so funny.
Mm.
With your upbringing in the 4 years was it in Nigeria, and then
Mm.
obviously you came to the UK. where I guess you did start primary school
Mhm.
in the UK. Did your mindset differ to your peers growing up?
You know, I can't really remember much of that time. Like, so I have some kind of early memories of being in Nigeria, but they're very vague. So I think that transition for me has pretty much been lost. I cannot really comment on like how it went or how I felt.
What
And
about in
what,
the UK then?
so I say again?
What about in the UK then? You know, obviously coming from, you know, the African heritage which you are,
Hmm.
you know, you mentioned, for example, the physics was the no-no, but everything else was okay. How do you
Hmm.
think that shaped you into the expectations of what you wanted to do for yourself and, as you mentioned, for others in your family?
Well, I mean, one thing I will mention is that, I kind of grew up in kind of like inner city London. I didn't go to the best secondary school,
Mm,
I would say. And so sometimes you kind of caught in that trap where you want to learn because you're interested, but others around you are less interested, but you want to be like part of your peer group. So there was sometimes that kind of struggle in like, actually, I want to pay attention to what's happening here because it's important to me. But
mm,
also, I just want to mess around with my friends because they're having so much fun. And I do remember this one specific time when we were doing our mock GCSEs. And so I was focusing on my paper, but then I looked up after about 30 minutes, like my particular like friendship group were all leaving.
mhm.
And it was like that internal struggle, like, oh, I want to just join them because they're obviously going to go off and have some fun. And I'm just here, just like, working hard and doing this paper. But, I kind of had to talk myself around, like, actually, this is the thing I need to be doing now. Stay focused, like you can see your friends another time. And so, yeah, and also you don't want to be labeled a nerd. I think now I can claim that
Yes, you can
word.
claim the nerd.
I can claim
You
that
can claim
word.
the nerd. Yeah.
Yeah, but like when you're in school, you don't want to be that person. You want to be the fun person. So there is a struggle, but I think that I've always been lucky because I've always had like a real sense of self and what I wanted to do. And like everybody, you can be kind of pulled by what others are doing, but in myself, I know what the right thing is and what I want to do and what I'm trying to get to. And so I don't allow myself to be kind of move from that path. And I
Yeah.
think that's always done me good. Like just do the thing that is telling me inside to do rather than what's going on outside.
And that's a really hard thing for people to tune into,
Hmm.
especially when you have, other factors that might be contributing to the decisions that you're making on a day-to-day basis. Take me, for example, and this isn't about me, but, I did what came naturally to me as opposed to what
Hmm.
I knew I wanted to do.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. It does.
So I decided that, even though I was okay at, say, for example, A-level subjects, I wasn't necessarily amazing. I was, just bordering the C, the Bs that,
Mm,
back then. And I studied music because it's what came very naturally to me.
mm,
Um, I didn't want to necessarily do music, but I was 18 years of age and I thought, well, I guess if music comes naturally, then let me head off in this direction.
mm,
Um, and there are a number of people who are obviously lost in that transition of taking that next step from your 16, 17, 18 years of age into university. So to hear that you knew that you wanted to do, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you knew you wanted to study sciences at
mm,
university,
mhm.
that's really, really comforting to know, especially for the next generation.
Yeah, I think, we just have to really understand ourselves and like hear that voice inside of you. And sometimes you have to have the space to be able to do that, to know that, okay, this is for me and this is not for me. And I need to focus on the thing that is for me.
Mm,
And also it's a very tough age because you don't necessarily know. Like when I was 17, I had no idea I was going to be working in pharma and regulatory affairs. What is that? But I just knew that I enjoyed science and that's what I wanted to kind of see where that took me.
yeah.
And I think sometimes you kind of expected to know what you want to do, like that question, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I just think it's such a, I don't want to say a horrible question, but it's not a helpful question.
It's hard. It's hard.
Yeah, it's a tough one. And like already, like my daughter is 5, and she says to me all the time that, she comes back and she goes, I want to be this today, or I want to be that today. And I'm like, girl, you can be whatever you want to be. Like, just like do what interests you, do what you're good at, just listen to yourself and not to others. And that's what the advice that I would give to anybody that's like at that kind of crossroads of what to do next.
Well, that's a nice segue, to be honest with you, into my next question of the professional career of yourself. You knew you wanted to be working within life sciences, but you didn't know what within. You mentioned that, you're working in regulatory affairs for a period of time, but you didn't know what it was back then. So, you've been in industry now for how many years, roughly?
Oh, gosh. More than 15, maybe 17 years at this point. Yeah.
17 years, roughly. How's your career path evolved from when you first started to currently? And I guess, added on to that question as well, how did this career within regulatory affairs come about from obviously when you were studying?
Okay. So if I start with like how I got into regulatory affairs. So like I said before, I had this university lecturer, so I did my PhD with him. And I was at that point where I was really thinking, is every other kind of PhD student was looking at postdocs and that kind of path into academia, and I was unsure. So and he was really helpful in helping me to see what my strengths were, in terms of, like, he said, I have this personality that does not necessarily want to be in a lab. And I was like, that's true. Like, that part of what I did was essential to the project as a whole, but it was not the part that I enjoyed the most. And so he was really helpful and pointed me towards an advert for the MHRA, which is the Medicines and Healthcare Regulatory Authority here in the UK. And that was really like a magical time for me, honestly. So it was my first job out of university. And I was with lots of other people who were in similar situations that have just finished their PhD, or it's just their first job. And it was a really like a special time in terms of like the possibilities of what you can do, meeting like-minded people that were completely different to you, but you enjoyed the same things. And just like also being around really smart people, just like people that are doing amazing things with science and amazing things in terms of drug development, and then that kind of set me off in terms of, okay, so what's next? And the MHRA, obviously, it's part of the government, so it's not necessarily the most like fastest, innovative place to work, but it's really good for getting like your feet on the ground and learning the basics, let's say. But I wanted to do more, so I set my sights on a big pharma because I thought that's the place to kind of learn those things. And so I went to work for GSK, which was also a great place to work. They're very good at systems and being organized, and you kind of learn how to do things like properly from the ground up. But it's a huge, behemoth of a company. So you kind of can feel like you're a small cog in like this big machine, which you essentially are. So, so you often only see a little part of what's happening in terms of the development of that particular medical product. And so, and also I think I was at an age where I was just kind of ready for a new adventure. So I moved to the Netherlands, and I worked for a slightly smaller company called Genzyme. And that was also, just amazing for lots of reasons, living in a new country, kind of having all these new experiences, kind of forcing yourself to do more and be more, because, if you don't like force yourself to make friends or try new things, it's just not going to be a successful time. So I definitely felt like my circle got bigger whilst I was there. And I think once you kind of stepped out of that, it never ever goes exactly back. It might go back a bit, but not exactly back. And then, yeah, you start to specialize at this point. And then I think I was there for about 4 years, and then I was kind of ready to come home. I think I'd had the adventure that I wanted, and I was trying to come home and settle down. So I moved back to the UK, and I started working for this small company. And there was really a baptism of fire. So because you end up wearing multiple hats. So I was doing things that I had never done, had never been exposed to, but it was just, for me, it was really exhilarating because it pushed me and it took away my fear. Because once you have like solved problems that you never knew how you were going to solve, you kind of know that if anything else comes along, you'll figure it out. And there's always a way. And it might not necessarily be the way you did it last time, but you can figure it out. And I think that gives you a special kind of confidence when you're like challenged in that way. So definitely, I'm always kind of open to trying new things as a result. So that I was there for a very long time, for about 9 years, because it was a really nice place to work, nice people, very comfortable. I learned a lot there, but then was kind of like, okay, what next? And so I started a new role last year, also in a kind of a small biotech company, but here really focused on early development. So that's the new challenge for me, was a new part of the kind of development pathway. So yeah, it's I can't say that I ever had a plan. It just kind of evolved, and depending on the people that were around me at that time and the kind of where I was at in terms of my life. But I think it's worked for me. I'm kind of really happy when I look back with the things that I've done, but also the knowledge that there's still more to come. And so, still open to new possibilities and whatever life has to throw at me.
That's lovely. Just going with the flow and speaking to people and seeing where it takes you. And, when I came to know a little bit more about the life sciences sector, the beautiful thing about it is that it's never coming to an end. It's like it's just non-stop. It's always on the go with new vaccines, new drugs, new ways of thinking, new ways of doing things, and obviously you think about artificial intelligence, and it's, and how it's come into play now within the life sciences sector, and how that could be a positive and a frustration. I'm not going to say a negative, but a frustration in other areas and things like that. Baptism of fire. Double-edged swords. These are two phrases which I've heard a lot, and it's obviously something which people can take to relish an opportunity to be in an environment where they have to sink or swim, and they have to go search, and they have to go looking, they have to come out of their comfort zone, dare I say, to progress. Not just themselves, but obviously the people who they're working with, and ultimately the company that they're working with, whether it's for someone else or your own consultancy. Thinking about identity here now, Bimpe, Race and STEM is a platform that everyone should know is for people of different multicultural backgrounds and ethnicities to share, to open up, to explore. Not everything is doom and gloom. There is so much positivity, in terms of support for people of these different cultures and backgrounds. What's been your experience like as a woman of color? Even, how you might pronounce your name, for example, your experiences of, working in this industry in the UK and in Europe, for example. How have you found that, and how have you navigated it all?
Well, it's a bit of a mixed bag, I suppose. I think mostly my experiences have been positive, I have to say. But, with these things, you don't know what you don't know. But I'm definitely a glass half full kind of person. So I will always find a way to put a positive spin on things. But you do have these moments sometimes when you're just like, so for instance, my name is obviously not an English name, right? So sometimes people can struggle with it, and I found that, particularly when I lived in the Netherlands, and they would try to Dutchify it, just like, it's obviously not a Dutch name, so please don't pronounce it in that way. And I am somebody that feels like your name is your identity, especially like
Yes.
being a Yoruba person, where the name that your parents give you is like a well thought out thing. It's, it describes what they want for you or what you brought into their life. So it's, your name has really a lot of meaning. So I really dislike it when people like mispronounce my name or other people. And I will always try for myself, like if I'm unsure how to, to pronounce your name, I'm going to ask you, like, I don't want to get it wrong. So, just help me so that I can get it right. So that is a little pet peeve of mine.
Yeah.
But being a woman in color, I think that, yeah, I think sometimes it can be hard, especially when you're the only person in these spaces that looks like you. Things are definitely improving. There's, more and more people of color. I think, especially when you work in a country like the UK and London specifically. So I think I'm definitely seeing from when I started that's changing, and there are definitely more people of color working in the industry. I mean, the advice that I would give, kind of young people that are coming through is just like, be yourself, right? I think it's really important to not to try to put yourselves in these kind of funny positions to please other people or to make other people feel more comfortable. And I think that we have to just like really just like let people meet us where we are in the same way that we meet them where they are, right? So, I'm not going to change the way I speak. I'm not going to, make my name more palatable. And I think we should encourage others to do the same. If you can say Tchaikovsky, you can say Bimpe. Do you know what I mean? It's not that hard. But I would say, for the most part, my experiences have been positive. And I think that I really kind of have valued some of the people that I've met along the way that have kind of, made those spaces to be more like open and accommodating, and I think that diversity is more than just color or religion or culture. It's really, of thought, of background, and I think that all the ways that we're different should be encouraged.
Yeah, absolutely. There's some great points there, which will come and circle back to some of them, absolutely. But you're experienced enough, you're nowhere near retirement unless, you're sitting on a pot of money,
Well,
which
I
people
don't
don't know about. Hey, come on. I'm bored and you've got a few silver friends of yours. But we're nowhere near retirement age. But I spoke at an educational institution last year to I think it was something called 500 Black undergrads, and there was a forum. They wanted to know what the future looked like for them in industry, because you can have a degree in biology, and then you can start off working as an administrator within a small startup, and then it becomes a career, just like what yours became or is becoming. And for those who, let's just say, for example, stereotypical, predominantly white environment of where you're working in on a day-to-day basis, we put a lot of emphasis on what it's like for the people of color. But if you just change that focus to try and identify what it's also like for, the white colleagues, for example, who seek you in the office, who see you in the lab. Well, they won't see you in the lab because you're clearly not wanting to work in the lab, and your mentor told you that. But how, what's the support structure there, for everybody to feel comfortable? you know. Is there anything that you would say from your experience, you know, where you would say, you know, you've been made to feel welcome because of this reason, or you've been acknowledged, you know, by people coming not down to your level, but meeting you at a certain playing field where, you know, race doesn't even come into question, you know?
Sure. Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, I don't think I've ever thought about it in terms of like the other view. But I mean, what I would say is that, you know, how do you want to be treated, right? I think if we can think about what it's like to be the only one, or what it's like to come to a space where you don't know anybody and you're just trying to fit in. And I think, you know, I'm the type of person where if I go to a party and I see someone that's by themselves, I'm drawn to that person because it's just like, you know, I just want everyone to be included. So I think, yeah, just like, you know, just creating an environment where people feel like they can participate is really important. And you know, also sometimes just kind of like checking yourself, because not every fault needs to be aired. Now, you know I have lots of weird and crazy thoughts, and I don't say all those things out all the time. And there are people that I can share those things with, and those people know who they are. But it's like there are sometimes, you know, we have these thoughts and we feel like, you know, we can just air them. But actually, you know, you have to think about what's the impact of that thing that you're saying. Like, how's that going to make the other person feel? Just because you're curious, but there are ways that you can be curious and you can get across that actually I'm interested to learn more about you without being like you know, offensive essentially. So that's just the one thing I would kind of just kind of put out there, because you know, my time in the Netherlands, you know, I think that people were very curious about me. I'm not really sure why, but I mean, I guess maybe because the one thing I really realized actually in the UK, we're really multicultural and you can meet all sorts of people here. But actually, the whole world may not necessarily be here. So before I moved to the Netherlands, I'd never met a person from Curacao. I'd never met a person from, you know, lots of places, but they just happen to live in the Netherlands. I guess there's the colonial history, but you just meet people that you just haven't come into contact with. And I suppose perhaps they hadn't met too many people like me. So there were times they could be very curious. And, you know, I'm always open to those kinds of discussions, but it's just as long as the kind of the questions you're asking are well thought out and are not going to, you know, offend. So, you know, so I always try to think about, you know, how I can learn more about this person, but in a way that would allow them to feel comfortable to open up. And yeah.
I've spent some time in Asia, for example, with my beautiful family, and this was just literally a year ago. And the amount of looks that we received, you know, my wife's mixed race, my children, my two girls are mixed race, and the amount of looks that we received, and you know, there's the initial, why are you looking at us? Come on, we're not even looking at you, we're just trying to go about our business. And then you take that moment to sink in and settle into life after a couple of hours or a couple of days. And then it became more of a case of, well, if I hadn't seen an animal before, I'll be really inquisitive as to know what the animal is, how they're, you know, related to the cats, the big cats, you know, or the reptiles, you know. I've not seen this before. Oh, why is this alligator purple, you know, instead of green, and all this type of stuff. So there is the element of, wow, we're actually just genuinely intrigued by, you know, how and who you are and what you might look like. I think there
And that
just
could
comes
be
a,
really lovely, you know. I like
it
that
can
you
be,
can
but I
and
think,
then I
carry
can
on.
say, and then you're the person that they've met that has been like, oh, I met this person from this place and they were amazing. They were so interesting and they, you know, they looked different, but we had so much in common, and that was just like a great conversation. And I love that.
The difference is when it's done in a respectful way, you know, because I'll be honest with you, there were times when I felt that, you know, I'm sure people were calling me Tiger Woods, you
Yeah,
know, because they thought I was famous.
I like it now
Yeah,
that you say that.
you know, no, Bimpe, we I don't have Tiger Woods money, but you know,
Well, there's a shame.
you know, I'm sure I heard that stuff as well. You know, but
Mm.
again, that's a curiosity. I mean, you know, I did
Mm.
go along with it for a little while. You know, after a few times, but nevertheless, you know, at the
Mm.
same time, I was in a position where the curiosity became one of innocence. That's what the mind process was. You know, and with that being the case, I was in a position to help navigate a lot of what we were feeling, you know, as a
Mm.
family, in
Mm.
terms of, you know, they're only being inquisitive. They're just trying to know a little bit more. You know, they're not used to seeing us,
Yeah,
people that look like us.
yeah.
Going back a little bit, however, to, let's say, for example, the let's say the professionals of tomorrow
Mm.
who are looking to get into this industry, and you know what, they've worked hard. They've come from their, you know, council estate in London, where they've been fortunate to get their grades at GCSE and A levels, and they're clearly passionate with their heart, and they've got a good head on them in regards to, I want to do my chemistry or biology degree, and I'm gonna see someone like Bimpe and aspire to be like her, and then try and take things one step further. But you know, they're walking into companies, Bimpe, where the majority of how people look will be not what they look like.
Sure.
What advice would you give to those individuals, in terms of, you know, maybe just staying on course? How would you
Yeah.
help them navigate? How would you help them? How would you promote them to continue the journey?
Well, I think the first thing is that I would say to them is that, they deserve to be there as much as anybody else, right? And like, so because sometimes you can have like imposter syndrome, like, wow, this is outside of my comfort zone. Can I do this?
Mm,
Am I going to fit in? And I would just say, you deserve to be there. You've done the work, you're there. And just like stay curious, ask the
mm,
questions, seek the people that are doing interesting things, forge relationships. And, it doesn't have to be with someone that you've had friendships with before. Some of the most like interesting like friendships I have are with people that are completely 100% different to me, like, older, from different countries. And I think you can learn so much from people that are different to you in terms of like their life experience. So, so stay curious, just like uh, talk it out, right? So if you've had a bad experience or you're not really sure what to do in this situation, speak with people that you think can help you in that situation, like where you can learn how you can tackle that situation better,
yeah,
and seek mentors. And they don't have to be in the company that you work in now. They can be in other companies. And I think like LinkedIn is great for that. You just see people that you think, oh, I really like what they're doing. Reach out, ask the
yeah,
questions, and then just see if they'll be willing to kind of have an involvement in your life. So I think you just have to, like, if you stay in your corner, you will remain there. So you have to be willing to kind of travel out and see what life can offer.
yeah. I like that. There is strength in community, isn't there?
There is.
And I think there is something to be said that, you know, if you want to find someone who is similar minded to yourself, those people are out there. You just need to go searching. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it's like if you have a flat tire and you want it changed the same day, you just put it into Google.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
you just literally have to go searching, and you'll find people, you'll find community, you'll find groups, you'll find educational institutes, you'll find companies, dare I say, who
Yeah,
are aligned to the values of who you are and what you want to be. You know,
absolutely.
I interviewed somebody recently, and he genuinely feels that he has landed himself a position as a medical affairs professional in an organization that is really in tune
Mm.
with the diversity, equity, and inclusion piece.
Mm.
and they're tapped into it from so many different angles, permitting their employees to go off on different ventures, to do their own things in regards to diversity, equity, and inclusion,
That's
or
amazing.
community outreach and things like that. And they've been encouraged to do so. So when in the 15, 20 years which I've been in this industry, this is the first time this is happening, you know, and it's so important to people because,
It is,
you know,
yeah.
we're living in a world now where there is so much accessibility. You know, we're growing up and we're hearing, you know, you have children at schools, with so many friends and colleagues have children at schools, where by just in the playground you're hearing things that you wouldn't hear when it was my age. You know, whether it's my friend's mum is married to another woman,
Yeah.
whether it's my friend's dad is a single dad. You know, whether it's a case of my teacher is Asian and she's taken time off for Ramadan, you know, or she has to fast or she has to pray. You know, there's so many different types of conversations that are happening on the playground now that by the time they get to 22 years of age, it'll be normality for these things to be happening within the organizations. And I think that's something very key to take in terms of the future of, you know, these rock stars, if you will, within the life sciences. It's a good question for you, actually. When you started your degree and you went into work, was there anyone that you looked up to in industry?
That's interesting. Yeah, you're right. I mean, what I would say is when I was at the MHRA, which was my first job out of university, is that I had a really good peer group. So, and we were all like kind of fresh from you know, from our degrees or PhDs, and we just wanted to just seize every opportunity. And it was nice to kind of have that kind of group where, you know, you could kind of bounce ideas off of each other and just say, you know, I learned this, you know, let me show you this so that you can see how to do this next time.
Yeah.
So, you know, so I think having a good peer group can be really useful. But yeah, I'm just trying to think, like, I mean, I guess I would say I have had a role where my manager really gave me like the room to be myself and to explore like what work could be, right? And I think before then, you know, managers had kind of put you in a little box and like, these are your roles and responsibilities, and I just want you to do that. Whilst he was very much like, you know, you just do it how you want to do it. You figure it out, and then you tell me how you want to do it. And that, I think, gave me a lot of confidence. And so I think your managers can be very, you know, they can help you to see things bigger if they choose to, or they can keep you small. So I think, yeah, I would say that especially when you're applying for roles, you want to know what that click is with your manager. Like, how are they going to help you to develop yourself? You know, do you think that they're going to allow you to try new things and to be more than just the job spec that you applied for? And that for me is always something that I look for in any new role.
You've been on both sides of that coin, you know, manager and also applying for positions where you're going to be managed. Mentorship, management.
Yeah.
It's a trend we're seeing more often in all sectors. What approach do you take with the future leaders of STEM? And where do you see this mentoring versus management relationship going?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I kind of feel like as a manager, you should be a mentor. I think it's not just about ensuring the work gets done, which of course is important. But I think at least the approach that I've always taken to managing people is that, you know, like, what do you want to do after you've done this, right?
Yeah.
So, and then how do I help you to get to that? Because I feel like that person is going to be with me for a period of time, and I want them to get the most out of that allows them to go on and do bigger and better things. So so I would always say that the two should really be entwined. And I think that if your manager is not mentoring you, then perhaps they're not a good fit for you. Yeah.
Well, you're, as you said earlier on, a woman who sees the glass half full.
Mm.
Whenever we've spoken and the camera's been on, you're always smiling. Um, I have two questions for you in closing.
Okay.
What impact are you hoping to make on this world?
Oh, goodness. To talk about end with a huge question. Aye.
That's the penultimate one.
Okay. Oh, there's
And
more.
I've got the last one's going to set you up lovely. Go on, Bimpe.
Okay, I can
And
hardly wait.
in fact, let's take it back. I'll make it easier for you. When you
Okay.
were 18, 19, 20, what impact were you hoping to make on the world?
Oh, I think I had a bit of tunnel vision back then. So I think it was really more about me. So I won't answer that question.
Okay. Well,
I
that could be after 10 p.m. kind of talk.
exactly. What am I going to get out of this world? I would say I have the humility to understand that you're here for a time and then you're gone, and at some point you will be forgotten, right? So I don't think I have like these big claims of wanting to kind of like change the world. I think that I want to give good energy so that people receive that energy, and that's what they take away from those moments with me is just like a good energy, like, and it can be something really small, like just you've helped them with something or you've had a nice conversation, or it can be bigger in terms of like the work that I do, and giving patients access to medicines that change their lives, which for me is amazing. But I also understand that I'm a cog in that, right? It's a team effort. So yeah, I just I would like to be remembered, if I'm gonna put it that way, as just like as giving good energy.
Okay. Energy.
Hmm.
Okay. And last question. And I want for you to think about your daughter as you're answering this one, if you can, because
That little rascal. Okay.
I don't believe it. Never can a 5-year-old be a rascal.
No.
No way. What advice would you give to your younger self growing up in this new age? So I guess that's to your younger self, literally.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then to your daughter who's
Daughter,
growing up
yeah.
in this.
Well, I always tell her like the importance of just like knowing what you want and being able to say what you want, and also being able to say what you don't want equally, right? And I think that's the challenge, isn't it? Because we're always you're kind of brought up as if to like you do what people tell you to do, what your teachers say, what your parents say, but at some point magically you're then able to just say what you want and what you don't want. So I always encourage her to be able to focus, like, what is it that you want in this situation, and what is it that you don't want, and being able to vocalize that, which I think is really important, especially with girls, because we're not always very good at being able to. We can be people pleasers because often that's just, I don't know how you kind of end up, and I definitely do not want her to be a people pleaser. And I would, I think I would have told myself that actually being yourself is really a good thing. There's only one of you. There's nobody else like you. And so there are certain things that you bring to the world that only you can bring, right? So it's really important that you are confident enough to bring your true and whole self. And just to be curious, like never limit yourself by saying, I don't think I would fit in there, or I'm not sure that is for me. Just be like, if it's interesting to you, then it's worthwhile having, a go. If it's something that intrigues you, then, look further. Just, stay curious, and then, so many more opportunities will open up to you.
That's beautiful. Bimpe, it's taken us a few months to get here. However, I'm glad we did. Thank you for sharing and shedding some light into you, your family, your past, your present, and to a degree, what looks like a very fruitful and energetic future. And I'm just grateful that there are professionals and people like you in the world who are actively thinking about inclusion and making people feel included in all areas of life, professionally and personally. So thank you so much, and I look forward to seeing you down the road.